On the far edge of the galaxy, where sunlight reached only as a faded glow, there was a small colony named Raven 9. It was not a place people visited. It was a place people forgot. The air smelled of dust and machine oil, and the sky was always gray. Among the broken towers and silent streets lived a man named Ethan Cole, a simple mechanic with calloused hands and a quiet soul. Ethan owned a small workshop made of old metal sheets and glowing lamps. He repaired drones, engines, and small delivery pods that others had long given up on. Every day he worked alone, humming softly while sparks from his tools danced in the dim light. He never asked for much: a warm meal, working hands, and peace at the end of the day. But under his calm eyes lived a deep sadness. Years ago, he had lost his family in a mining accident. Since then, he lived only for his work, fixing broken machines. Maybe because fixing things made him feel that not everything in the universe had to stay broken. The nights on Raven 9 were long and cold. When the twin moons rose, the wind howled through the narrow streets like a ghost's cry. On one such night, as a storm raged across the colony, Ethan was locking his workshop when he heard a faint noise, a soft cry coming from the alley behind his shop. He turned, his old jacket flapping in the wind. There, under a pile of old crates, he saw something move. Carefully, he lifted a broken metal sheet and froze. There were children, 5 of them, small, dirty, and trembling in the cold. Their clothes were torn and their faces were pale with hunger. They looked like they hadn't eaten for days. Ethan's first thought was fear. How had they survived the storm? Where were their parents? But then one of the children, a small girl with bright silver eyes, looked up at him and whispered, "Please, we're hungry." Ethan's heart clenched. He knew hunger. He knew loneliness. Without a word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the only food he had, a small piece of bread and a container of soup he had saved for himself. He placed it before them. "Eat," he said softly. "All of you." The children hesitated at first, then began to eat quickly, their tiny hands shaking. Ethan watched in silence, the cold wind blowing through his hair. For a moment he forgot the storm, the loneliness, the broken world outside. All he saw were 5 small souls clinging to life. When they finished, he brought them inside his workshop. He wrapped them in old blankets and lit a small heater he had built from spare parts. The room filled with a soft orange glow. The children sat quietly, staring at the machines on the shelves. Ethan smiled faintly and said, "You can stay here tonight. It's not much, but it's warm." The youngest boy looked up and asked, "Why are you helping us, sir?" "We have nothing." Ethan knelt beside him, his eyes gentle. "No one should be cold and hungry," he said. "Not in any corner of this galaxy." The children looked at him in silence. Then the little girl, the one with silver eyes, whispered, "We won't forget you, mister. Someday we'll come back for you." Ethan chuckled. "You don't have to. Just grow up strong and help others when you can." That night, as the storm screamed outside, Ethan watched over the children as they slept beside the heater. He wondered who they were, where they came from, and why they looked so different, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark, their skin marked with strange symbols. But he didn't ask questions. He just made sure they were warm. By morning, the storm had passed. When Ethan woke up, the children were gone. They had left quietly, leaving behind only a small token, a metal pendant shaped like a sun, glowing faintly with blue light. Ethan turned it over in his palm, puzzled. It was beautiful, unlike anything he had ever seen. He placed it on his workbench and whispered, "Good luck. Little ones." He didn't know that the pendant was a royal insignia, or that the children he had saved were the lost heirs of the Solaris Empire, hiding from assassins sent to erase their bloodline. Ethan just smiled and went back to work, thinking it was just another strange night in his lonely life. But the universe never forgets an act of kindness. And 10 years later, when the sky over Raven 9 burned bright with the engines of a royal spaceship, the name Ethan Cole would be remembered, not as a mechanic, but as the man who gave orphans a warm meal and changed the fate of an empire. 10 years had passed since that stormy night on Raven 9. The night Ethan Cole had given 5 starving children a warm meal and a safe place to sleep. He never saw them again, but sometimes when the nights grew cold and quiet, he still thought of their faces. The small boy who smiled through cracked lips, the girl with silver eyes who had promised to come back for him. Life on the colony hadn't changed much. The world around him was still gray, still forgotten by the great powers of the galaxy. Raven 9 was a mining outpost that time itself had left behind. The only sounds were the hum of broken engines, the hiss of air leaks, and the distant rumble of ships that never landed. Ethan's workshop stood where it always had, on the edge of the colony, between the scrapyard and the empty marketplace. Its walls were patched with metal, its roof still leaked when it rained, and the old sign above the door still flickered. Ethan Cole, repairs for all. He was older now. His beard was gray, his hands more scarred. His eyes had grown tired, but they still held kindness. Every morning he brewed bitter coffee, fixed engines for delivery drones, and helped neighbors with their broken air vents. People liked Ethan, not because he was strong or rich, but because he never said no when someone asked for help. But there were days when loneliness felt heavier than the gravity that held the colony down. He had no family, no visitors, and no dreams left, only the memory of that night when he had saved those strange children. Sometimes he looked at the small pendant they had left behind, still glowing faintly on his shelf. He didn't know what it was made of, but he liked to think of it as a lucky charm. Then, one morning, something strange happened. The air changed. The colony sky, always gray and dull, began to shimmer with gold light. The ground shook softly and people came out of their homes shielding their eyes. At first, they thought it was a meteor storm, until the shadows grew larger, spreading across the town square like a moving eclipse. And then they saw it, a massive spaceship, descending slowly from the clouds. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its surface was smooth and silver, with glowing blue patterns that pulsed like veins of light. The ship was easily the size of a mountain, and symbols of the Royal Solaris Empire gleamed across its hull. Everyone gasped. The Solaris Empire was the most powerful force in the galaxy, the rulers of entire star systems. No royal ship had ever come to a forgotten place like Raven 9. The colony guards scrambled to take positions, unsure whether to salute or run. The old communication towers flickered to life for the first time in years. Ethan stepped out of his workshop, squinting at the bright light. The wind from the ship's engines whipped across the streets, lifting dust into the air. He shielded his face and watched in silence as the ship hovered, and then slowly descended right in front of his workshop. The entire colony froze. Dozens of figures in silver armor stepped out, forming perfect lines. Their uniforms carried the crest of the royal family, a burning sun surrounded by 12 stars. And at their head stood a tall officer in a dark blue cloak. His voice boomed through the colony speakers. "Engineer Ethan Cole, by order of the Royal House of Solaris, you are requested to board the ship immediately." Ethan blinked. "Me?" He looked around, thinking it must be a mistake. But the officer's gaze didn't waver. Soldiers turned toward him in perfect unison. The crowd began to whisper. Why would the Royals want him? Maybe he broke one of their drones? No, look at that ship. That's the Royal Vanguard. Ethan felt his chest tighten. His mind spun. He hadn't even left the colony in years. What could the royal family want with an old mechanic? Before he could speak, a soft hum filled the air as a smaller shuttle detached from the main ship. It floated down gracefully and landed near him. The door opened, revealing a figure in royal robes, their face hidden behind a silver mask. The masked figure stepped forward and said softly, "Ethan Cole, we have come for you." Just as we promised, Ethan froze. That voice, it was familiar, faintly echoing in his memory. The voice of a child he once knew. Now grown, the air seemed to disappear. The crowd went silent, and Ethan realized the promise made under a stormy sky 10 years ago had finally been kept. He didn't understand why. He didn't know who these people truly were. But as the royal ship's lights reflected in his tired eyes, one thing was clear. His quiet life on Raven 9 was over. The universe had come calling. And this time it was his name written in the stars. The royal shuttle hovered a few feet above the dusty ground, its engines humming softly like a heartbeat of light. The wind it stirred swept through the colony streets, carrying dust, papers, and whispers with it. Everyone watched in silence. Hundreds of eyes fixed on Ethan Cole, the quiet mechanic who had just been summoned by the rulers of the galaxy. Ethan stood frozen outside his workshop, the heat from the ship brushing against his skin. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, every beat echoing the same question. Why me? The masked royal figure took a slow step forward. The silver robes shimmered with threads of blue energy, flowing like living light. When the figure spoke, the voice was calm but carried the weight of command. Engineer Ethan Cole, you are to come with us. You are not under arrest, you are remembered. The last word struck him strangely. Remembered. He didn't know what it meant, but the voice felt oddly familiar. Warm and distant, like a forgotten melody from his past. Ethan hesitated. Remembered? I don't even know who you are. The figure tilted their head slightly. You will soon. With a motion of their hand, the shuttle door opened wider, revealing a bright corridor of golden light inside. The officer beside Ethan saluted and said respectfully, Sir, please. The Royal House requests your presence. Ethan looked back at his old workshop one last time. The flickering lights, the shelves of half-fixed machines, the pendant the children had left behind still glowing faintly on his desk. He reached out, grabbed the pendant, and slipped it into his pocket. Something deep inside told him he might need it. Then, taking a slow breath, he stepped into the royal shuttle. Inside, everything felt unreal. The air smelled clean, almost too clean, like lightning before a storm. The walls pulsed with soft light, and the seats were made of smooth metal that adjusted to his shape when he sat down. Ethan had repaired hundreds of ships in his life, but nothing like this. The technology here was beyond his imagination, silent, perfect, and alive. The shuttle rose quietly, lifting off the colony ground. Through the small viewing window, Ethan saw the people below growing smaller and smaller until Raven 9 was just a patch of gray in a sea of clouds. He had lived there all his life, and now it was vanishing beneath him, like a dream fading at sunrise. He turned to the masked figure sitting across from him. You said I'm remembered. What does that mean? The figure did not answer. Instead, they looked out the window and said softly, You'll see soon enough. They've waited a long time to see you. They? Ethan asked. But the figure only smiled beneath the mask. Minutes later, the shuttle docked inside the main royal vessel, a ship so vast it felt like a floating city. Ethan stepped out and found himself standing in a grand corridor lined with glowing pillars and holographic banners of the Solaris sun. Royal guards in shining armor stood silently on both sides, their eyes hidden behind silver helmets. Every movement, every sound felt precise, disciplined. Ethan walked slowly, his boots echoing softly on the polished floor. The masked escort led him to a large circular chamber. The door slid open without a sound. Inside was beauty he could barely comprehend. A dome of glass revealed the stars outside, a billion lights burning across black space. Floating near the ceiling were holographic planets softly rotating in the air, and at the center of the room stood 3 people dressed in royal robes, their backs turned to him. The masked figure bowed. Your Highness, the man you asked for, Ethan Cole. The tallest of the 3 turned around. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The face before him was young, no more than 20, but the eyes. The eyes were silver, the same silver as the little girl's eyes from 10 years ago. You kept your promise, she said gently. Ethan's hands trembled. He took a step back. It's you, the children from the storm. The girl smiled faintly. We were not just children, Mr. Ethan. We were fugitives, heirs of Solaris, hiding from those who wanted us dead. You gave us warmth when no one else did. You saved the royal bloodline. Ethan couldn't speak. His throat tightened. I didn't even know. You didn't have to, she interrupted. Kindness doesn't ask for a reason. Behind her stood the others. The small boy who was now a prince with sharp eyes and calm strength, and another who had become the captain of the royal fleet. They all looked at him with deep respect. 10 years ago, said the prince, you gave orphans a warm meal. Today we give back what was never forgotten. He raised his hand and the walls around them shifted, revealing a view of the galaxy itself, stars glowing like diamonds. Welcome aboard the Royal Vanguard, Ethan Cole, the prince said. The Empire owes you a debt that cannot be repaid. Ethan stared out into the stars, overwhelmed. He had spent 10 years fixing broken machines in silence, never knowing he had already fixed something far greater. He had fixed fate itself, and somewhere deep within the royal ship, the pendant in his pocket began to glow, as if the universe itself had just remembered his kindness. The royal chamber fell silent after the prince's words. Ethan stood still, surrounded by the glow of stars and the quiet hum of the ship's engines. He could hardly breathe. Just hours ago, he had been fixing a broken air filter in his workshop. Now he was standing before the rulers of half the galaxy. The young royals looked at him with a mix of respect and sadness. They were no longer the frightened children he had once found in the alley. Their faces were calm, their voices strong, but their eyes carried the weight of history and loss. Princess Lyra, the silver-eyed girl he remembered, stepped closer. Her royal robe shimmered like starlight as she said softly, "We never forgot you, Mr. Ethan. You were the first person who showed us kindness after our world fell apart." Ethan blinked. "Your world fell apart?" She nodded. "You saved us on the night our kingdom was burned, 10 years ago. The same night he had found those starving children." Lyra's voice trembled as she continued. "Our home planet, Solaris Prime, was attacked from within. The royal palace was betrayed by our own council. They wanted to end the royal bloodline, to take control of the empire. My parents were killed. We barely escaped." Ethan's heart sank. The storm he remembered had not been just bad weather. It was the fire of war. The thunder he'd heard was not thunder at all. It was the sound of ships exploding in the night sky. The prince, now known as Auric Solaris, heir to the throne, stepped forward. His voice was steady, but his hands were clenched behind his back. "We were sent away in a secret transport hidden in cargo crates. Our guardians died protecting us before the ship crashed near your colony. You found us, fed us, and sheltered us when no one else would." Ethan's eyes widened. "That night, all that chaos. I thought it was just a mining storm." Auric smiled faintly. "No, Ethan, it was the fall of an empire." Ethan lowered his head, overwhelmed. He had helped them without knowing it, and in doing so, had unknowingly changed the galaxy's future. But one question burned in his mind. "Why come for me now?" he asked quietly. "After all these years?" Lyra turned toward the large window that showed the stars. "Because the same ones who tried to destroy our family are back. They are stronger now, and they are hunting anyone connected to that night." Her voice darkened. "Including you." Ethan froze. "Me, but I'm just a mechanic." The captain of the royal fleet, the boy who had once been the smallest among them, spoke up now. His name was Rin, and his voice was firm. "You may be a mechanic, but you're also a witness. You helped us when the Empire's assassins were chasing us. They know you existed. They have been watching the Raven 9 colonies for years. We couldn't risk contacting you until it was safe." Ethan felt a chill run through him. So all these years, his quiet little life had been shadowed by danger he never even saw. He looked at Lyra and whispered, "I didn't even know I was part of something so big." Lyra smiled sadly. "That's why you are different from the rest of us. You helped without asking who we were. You didn't care about thrones or power. You cared about people." A holographic table lit up between them, displaying blue light maps of planets and symbols. Auric tapped a glowing mark that pulsed near Raven 9. "This," he said, "is where we first hid." That small act of mercy, feeding 5 strangers, became the reason the royal line survived. The Empire was rebuilt from those same orphans, and you, Ethan Cole, became part of our legend. Ethan looked at the glowing map, stunned. "I'm no hero, Auric. I just gave hungry kids a meal." "Exactly," Auric replied. "And that's why you're greater than one." The room fell quiet again. Outside, the stars drifted by, slow and endless. Ethan's reflection stared back at him in the glass, a tired man in worn clothes standing among royalty. He shook his head slowly. "I don't know what to say." Lyra stepped closer, placing a small metal cube in his hand. "You already said everything 10 years ago when you told us no one should be hungry. This is a royal mark of honor, the son of Solaris. Few are ever given one." Ethan looked down at the cube. When he touched it, it unfolded into a small golden insignia, glowing like the rising sun. For a moment, the old mechanic's eyes shimmered with tears. He had never expected anything in return for kindness, but now, standing in the center of the Empire's greatest ship, surrounded by the very children he had once protected, he realized something simple and true. Even the smallest act of kindness can echo across the stars. But before he could speak again, alarms suddenly blared through the ship, sharp and violent. Red lights flashed across the chamber. The holographic stars flickered into warning symbols. A Royal Guard shouted. Enemy ships approaching from hyperspace. Unknown fleet, they've found us. The Royals turned to Ethan. Arik's calm expression hardened. They're here for the man who once saved us. Ethan's pulse raced. The past had returned, not as memory but as a storm. And this time, it wasn't just 5 children who needed saving. It was the Empire itself. The alarm screamed through the corridors like angry spirits. Red lights flashed across the silver walls of the Royal Vanguard, painting everything in a storm of color and fear. Ethan stood frozen, his heart pounding as Royal Guards rushed past him, weapons glowing, boots echoing on the metallic floor. Princess Lyra and Prince Arik moved quickly to the control deck, their calm turning into command. The ship's voice, calm yet urgent, echoed through the speakers. Warning. Unidentified fleet detected. Multiple ships approaching from hyperspace. Weapons locked. Ethan followed as the Royals entered the command bridge, a vast room filled with holographic screens, glowing runes, and windows that showed the cold beauty of space. Through the glass, the black void came alive with light, a cluster of dark ships fast and deadly, breaking out of hyperspace like a swarm of shadows. Arik clenched his fists. They found us sooner than expected. Lyra's eyes narrowed. The same rebels who destroyed our home. Her voice trembled, not with fear but with fury. Ethan stared at the enemy fleet. He could see the sleek metal of their ships, the red insignia that glowed like fire. He wasn't a soldier, but even he could tell they were outnumbered. Can't we just leave? He asked. Jump away from here? Rin, now captain of the Royal Fleet, shook his head. The hyperspace drive was damaged 2 hours ago. They hit us with a tracking beacon before we arrived at Raven 9. They were waiting. Ethan looked around the control room. Officers shouting coordinates. Guards sealing doors, the distant tremor of cannons charging. Everything was chaos, yet the young royal stood steady in the middle of it all, unshaken. He felt something stir inside him, pride maybe, or awe. These were the same children who once hid under a blanket in his workshop. Now they stood tall before a storm. Arik turned toward him. Ethan, you should go to the safe quarters. This is not your fight. But Ethan shook his head. I've seen things break before, he said quietly. Engines, machines, even people. And I know one thing. Everything breaks faster when left alone. He looked at the screens again, then at the crew struggling to stabilize the ship's power grid. The readings were blinking red. Overheat warnings, energy leaks, failing systems. Ethan's instincts kicked in. Your power relays are out of sync, he said, moving toward the console. If that core overheats, your weapons will shut down before you can even fire. A young officer looked up, startled. You can read Royal Tech? Ethan smiled faintly. I can read machines. Doesn't matter whose flag they fly under. Lyra's eyes softened. Then help us. Ethan ran toward the lower deck where the ship's heart and the quantum core pulsed like a living sun. He grabbed a toolkit from a wall locker and dove straight into the maintenance hatch. Sparks burst around him. Cables snapped like whips and the heat burned through his gloves. The engine's voice roared, deep and angry. He shouted to the nearest engineer, "Shut off the main coolant line!" The young man hesitated. "But that'll overheat the—" "Do it!" Ethan barked. "Trust me." As the coolant flow stopped, Ethan reconnected 2 damaged conduits using a piece of wire and part of his own wrench. The lights flickered, then steadied. The ship's energy flow realigned, glowing bright blue again. He wiped sweat from his forehead, his face streaked with grease. Power rerouted. Weapons online. Up on the bridge, Rin shouted. Energy levels restored. Cannons ready to fire. Arik looked at Lyra. She smiled faintly. Your mechanic just saved the fleet. Outside, the royal cannons blazed to life, firing beams of pure energy into the dark void. Enemy ships exploded in silent bursts of light. But the battle wasn't over. More ships emerged from hyperspace, larger and more dangerous. The royal vessel shook violently as explosions rocked its hull. Ethan climbed back to the bridge just as another blast hit the side. Shields down to 30%. A guard shouted. Arik looked at him. You saved us once. Can you do it again? Ethan grinned tiredly. Guess I'll have to. He ran to the auxiliary controls and began typing commands faster than most officers could think. I can reroute secondary power to the defense shields. It'll burn out your backup generators, but it'll keep us alive. Lyra stepped beside him. Do it. A deep hum filled the ship as Ethan made the final connection. The lights flickered, and a wave of golden energy burst from the hull, forming a glowing barrier around the royal ship. The next enemy barrage hit, but this time it bounced off harmlessly. Cheers erupted across the bridge. The Royal Guard saluted. For the second time in his life, Ethan Cole had saved the heirs of Solaris. When the battle ended, the enemy ships retreated into the black. The stars were quiet once more. Ethan leaned against the console, exhausted. Lyra approached him slowly, her silver eyes shining. "You saved us again, Ethan, just like before." He smiled faintly. "I told you, I fix broken things." Arik placed a hand on his shoulder. "You fixed more than that. You saved an empire." The lights dimmed as the ship entered safe mode, drifting peacefully among the stars. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lyra stepped forward and said softly, "From this day forward, you are no longer just a mechanic. You are the guardian of Solaris." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "Guardian?" She nodded. "A protector of light, a title given only to those who save the royal line." The bridge fell silent again, only the hum of the stars around them. Ethan looked out at the endless galaxy, and for the first time in years, he felt something he thought he had lost forever: purpose. The stars outside the royal ship glimmered like tiny fires in an ocean of darkness. The Royal Vanguard drifted quietly through space, its engines humming low after the brutal battle. Inside, the once bright corridors now carried the scars of war: burned panels, flickering lights, and the smell of metal and ozone. Ethan Cole walked slowly through the hallway, his hands stained with grease and ash. Every muscle in his body ached, but he felt alive. He had repaired the ship, saved the royal heirs, and earned their gratitude. The title they gave him, Guardian of Solarium, still echoed in his mind. He wasn't sure he deserved it. He was just a man who fixed things. But for the first time, he felt like his life finally had meaning. When he entered the royal lounge, Princess Lyra was there, looking out the large window where stars drifted silently. Her silver eyes reflected the light like water. She turned and smiled softly. "You should rest, Ethan. You've done more than enough." Ethan chuckled tiredly. "Machines don't rest, Princess. They wait for the next job." Lyra smiled faintly. "That's what worries me. You act like you're a machine, but you're not. You're human, with a heart that still believes in others." He didn't reply. For a moment, silence filled the room, peaceful but heavy. Then the door opened. Captain Rin entered, his face grim. "Your Highness," he said, "we may have a problem." Arik followed close behind, his expression dark. "Scanners picked up an encrypted signal," he said. "It's coming from inside the ship." Lyra's smile faded. "You mean someone betrayed us?" Rin nodded. "Someone is sending coordinates to the enemy fleet." Ethan frowned. "Can't you trace it?" "We tried," Rin said. "The signal keeps moving, jumping from terminal to terminal. Whoever is doing this knows our systems well." Arik turned toward Ethan. "You're the only one who worked deep inside the power core during the attack. You saw every circuit, every data link. Can you find it?" Ethan hesitated. "You think I can?" Arik nodded. "You fixed what our own engineers couldn't. Now, we need you to find who's trying to break us." Without another word, Ethan followed them to the core control room, the heart of the Royal Vanguard. The glowing energy pulse cast long blue shadows on the walls. He connected a data probe to the central terminal and began searching through the energy grid. Lines of code flickered before his eyes, forming patterns he barely understood, but he didn't need to understand everything. He trusted instinct. He had worked with machines all his life, and he could feel when something was wrong. Then he saw it, a flicker in the current, a small code that shouldn't be there. It pulsed like a heartbeat. "There," he whispered. "Someone planted a relay in the secondary coolant line." "It's sending beacon signals." Rin's eyes widened. "That section's restricted. Only officers have clearance." Before Ethan could respond, the door opened. A royal guard entered, tall, silent, his face hidden by a black visor. He held a plasma rifle. "Step away from the console," the guard ordered. Arik turned sharply. "Identify yourself." But before the guard could reply, he fired. The blast struck the wall near Arik, sending sparks flying. Ethan tackled Lyra behind the console as Rin dove for cover, returning fire. The room exploded into chaos. Flashes of blue light, the hum of weapons, the crackle of energy shields. Ethan crawled toward the main control board and yanked a power cable loose. The lights flickered and the security system went offline, confusing the attacker's visor sensors. Now. Rin shouted. Arik fired a precise shot. The guard fell, his armor cracking open, revealing not a man but a synthetic. A machine made to look human, wires still twitching where blood should be. Lyra gasped. A Royal Sentry unit. They've infiltrated our guard ranks. Ethan stared at the sparking body, realization hitting him. They were never just tracking you, he said. They were inside your empire the whole time. The crew secured the room. Arik placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. You saved us again, not just from battle, but from betrayal. Ethan shook his head. You don't need to thank me, Your Highness. I only did what was right. But Lyra stepped closer. Her voice was soft, sincere. No, Ethan, loyalty like yours is rare. Most people follow orders. You follow your heart. That's what makes you different. He met her gaze for a moment. The same silver eyes he remembered from 10 years ago, still filled with light. Maybe so, he said quietly. But hearts break too. Be careful who you trust. Later that night, as the ship floated silently through the starlit void, Ethan sat alone in the maintenance bay. The pendant, the one the children had left behind years ago, lay in his hand. Glowing faintly, he whispered, Guess we're not done fixing things yet. Unseen by him, a small holographic light blinked on the pendant's surface. It projected a hidden map, ancient symbols forming slowly in the air. Coordinates, leading to a place deep in uncharted space. Ethan stared at it breathless. The pendant was not just a memory, and it was a key. And whatever it unlocked was waiting for him. The test of loyalty was over, but the test of destiny was just beginning. The Royal Vanguard sailed quietly through the deep silence of space. The stars shimmered outside its glass dome. Countless lights scattered across the Black Sea, each one holding a story. But none shone brighter than the one that was about to begin. Ethan Cole stood in the observation deck, staring at the holographic map hovering above his hand. The pendant, the same one he had kept for 10 long years, was no longer just a memory of 5 hungry children. It was now alive, pulsing with energy, projecting coordinates in golden light. Princess Lyra approached, her long silver robes trailing softly behind her. You activated it, she said, her voice both amazed and uncertain. Ethan nodded. It wasn't just a pendant. It was a key, hidden right under our noses. He turned the glowing map toward her. These coordinates, they point to somewhere far beyond the royal borders. A forgotten system. Arik joined them, arms crossed. That's impossible. The archives show no record of any colony there. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe that's the point. Some places are meant to stay forgotten until they're ready to be found. Lyra stared at the map for a long time. The golden light reflected in her eyes just like the day he first saw her as a child, shivering in the cold. What do you think it is? She asked. Ethan shrugged lightly. Could be a weapon. Could be hope. The pendant came from your mother, didn't it? Lyra froze. How do you know that? Ethan looked at her softly. Mothers always leave something behind to protect their children. Silence fell between them. Outside the window, the stars seemed to lean closer, listening. Hours later, the Royal Vanguard entered hyperspace following the mysterious coordinates. The crew held their breath as the stars stretched into streaks of white and blue, then folded back into a calm glow. Before them lay a quiet world, a planet wrapped in silver clouds and golden rings untouched by time. Rin's voice came over the comms. Scanning complete. No life signs. But there's something beneath the surface, metallic, massive. Ethan leaned over the console. Take us down. The ship descended slowly through the clouds, lightning flashing around its hull. As they broke through the storm, a sight of wonder appeared below, a colossal structure built into the mountains, glowing faintly under the planet's pale sun. It wasn't a base. It wasn't a temple. It was a machine, a perfect circle of towers humming in silence like a sleeping heart. When they landed, the air shimmered with energy. Ethan stepped onto the planet's surface, his boots sinking slightly into golden dust. The royal heirs followed close behind, guarded by a few soldiers. He approached the structure's center, a round platform with markings that looked ancient yet strangely familiar. The pendant in his hand began to glow brighter. It's reacting, Lyra whispered. It recognizes you. Ethan placed the pendant into a small slot at the platform's center. A deep sound rumbled beneath their feet, a heartbeat from the planet itself. The ground trembled as light spread outward, racing up the towers in waves of fire and gold. A holographic figure appeared before them, tall, radiant, and gentle. It was a woman. Her eyes shone the same silver as Lyra's. "My children," the hologram spoke softly. "If you are seeing this, then the bloodline of Solaris still lives," Lyra gasped. "Mother." Ethan stepped back, awestruck. The hologram continued. "And to the one who sheltered them in their darkest night, Ethan Cole, know that your kindness preserved our legacy. This world holds the last power of Solaris, built not to destroy but to heal. It can restore worlds and famine and give life where there is none. It is yours to protect." The light dimmed and the hologram vanished, leaving behind only silence and wind. Ethan stood still, the words echoing in his heart. Not to destroy but to heal. He looked around at the glowing machine, realizing what it meant. Not a weapon, but a gift of creation. Something worth more than any throne. Lyra turned to him, tears in her eyes. "You were meant to find this, Ethan, not us. You." He smiled softly. "No, we found it together." Back aboard the Royal Vanguard, the Empire's crest shimmered across the screens. News of the discovery spread through the stars. The rebirth of the Solaris legacy, not through conquest, but through compassion. Ethan declined the royal offers of wealth and title. Instead, he chose to stay among the stars, leading a team of engineers who used the ancient Solaris power to rebuild dying worlds. He never called himself a hero. He never wore a crown. But when ships across the galaxy saw a humble man in a mechanic's coat walking beside the royal fleet, they bowed in respect, because legends whispered his name. The man who fed orphans and saved an empire, the one who fixed broken things, not just machines, but hearts and hope itself, and somewhere in the cold silence of space. Ethan Cole smiled, watching the golden light of a new sunrise stretch across the stars. "No one," he whispered, "should ever be cold and hungry again."